Gustav Klimt was born on July the 14th, 1862, in a small village on the western outskirts of Vienna. This is the story of a painter who came from poverty, yet found his artistic bearings creating murals for some of the grandest buildings in Europe. His personal vision was one of wildly adventurous compositions that explored the boundaries between life and death, love and despair, the gilded surface and the darkness lurking beneath. In Klimt's innovative world, faces and bodies are seen from unorthodox angles, their human forms woven into a trembling firmament as if existing in a kind of memory state. Even in his landscapes, the patterning of light and the arrangement of elements was radical for its time, teaching us to see the world around us with fresh eyes. As such, his paintings achieve an immediacy and intimacy that is hardly matched in Western art. As a younger man, with his burly physique and grey-green eyes, Gustav was considered strikingly handsome, with one of his models describing him as exceptionally animal-like. He is believed to have fathered at least 14 children, yet lived with his mother, Anna, his entire life. Klimt lived at a time of extraordinary change in the cultural and intellectual scene. Sigmund Freud was mapping the unconscious. Gustav Mahler was transforming music. Architects Otto Wagner and Adolf Loos were reimagining the feel of the city, and later Wittgenstein redefined philosophy. It was a world that seemed to crackle with restless, radical energy, and Klimt contributed to that energy with paintings that broke with conventional decorum. Today his works are among the most expensive artworks ever sold, claiming our attention through their daring, unorthodox symbolism and peerless painting technique. But who was Gustav Klimt? Klimt was born the son of a goldsmith and gold engraver, and it is commonly thought that his love of the glittering surface came from his close proximity to gold as a youngster. Yet for his father, Ernst, it was not a prosperous trade, and the family of 7 children were raised in lowly working-class conditions. The young Gustav felt this keenly. He was bullied at school for his humble background, and at one point missed a whole year of education because he had no trousers to wear. Despite their limited means, his father fostered the artistic leanings of his children, and all 3 sons, Gustav, Ernst Jr., and Georg, inherited his talent and pursued careers in the arts. At 14, Gustav won a scholarship at the Vienna School of Arts and Crafts. It was not a fine arts education as such, but consisted of practical instruction in subjects like metalworking, mosaics, and art history. Gustav specialized as an architectural mural painter under the decorative artist Ferdinand Laufberger, where he was taught to think of art as something that lived on walls and ceilings, something that surrounded and enclosed human life. Very soon, Gustav and his brother Ernst, along with a fellow student named Franz Matsch, were taking on professional commissions. In 1881, when Klimt was about 19 years old, they formed the Künstler Company, the Artist Company, a small commercial workshop. They made ceiling paintings and curtains for theatres in Reckenberg and Karlsbad. They were technically accomplished and highly industrious, and their reputation quickly grew. The bigger opportunities came in Vienna itself, the bustling capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Then in the midst of a remarkable transformation, the Ringstrasse had just been completed, a grand 5-kilometre circular boulevard that ringed the historic inner centre, complete with a new opera house, parliament and university. The population was surging too, as was the feverish industrial growth. It was into this gilded, rapidly modernising world that Klimt made his way as a young artisan. The workshop's grandest commission came in 1886, the ceiling panels for the Art History Museum and the Berg Theatre, where Klimt painted the history of theatre from antiquity to the present day. It was so impressive that Emperor Franz Joseph awarded Gustav the Golden Order of Merit. He was just 26 at the time. The brothers basked in a fame and repute that seemed to promise everything. Then 2 things happened in quick succession, and Klimt's world changed profoundly. In 1892, Klimt's father died, and then 5 months later, his brother Ernst followed, passing suddenly at the age of only 28. The loss to Gustav was devastating. Ernst left behind a young wife and a newborn daughter. Gustav assumed guardianship of the daughter and completed the works his brother had left unfinished. Among them, this work, Hans first delivering an impromptu performance in Rothenburg. But something had shifted irrevocably. Klimt's paintings found a new, sharper impetus. After completing a series of portrait commissions, his work began to move towards a new mode that explored inner psychological states, centered on desire, death, and the body in extremity. By 1897, several key hallmarks of Klimt's painting style had entered his work, notably the use of figures in profile or sharp silhouette, to allow their outlines to take priority over naturalistic portrayals. Alongside this came a willingness to flatten the pictorial space, allowing foreground and background to press against one another in strong, vivid, geometric arrangements. Both qualities can be seen in his portrait of Sonia Nips, where the light of her dress against the deep colours of the backdrop interact to carve a sharp, decisive boundary across the square format canvas. These were techniques he would return to and build on again and again, recurring in works like this one, Pallas Athena, which shows the Greek goddess of wisdom, war and handicrafts. 1897 turned out to be an important year for Klimt. Now in his mid-30s, he had the confidence and the experience to do something decisive. Alongside a group of painters, sculptors and designers, among them the architects Joseph Hoffmann and Joseph Maria Olbrich, and the artists Koloman Moser, Klimt founded what they called the Vienna Secession, a collective of makers who moved freely between painting, sculpture and decorative design. They called this concept a total work of art. Klimt was the Secession's president and the most prominent public figure. The name, the Secession, was a declaration, meaning to withdraw or break away. Their motto, inscribed above the door of their new building, designed by Olbrich, said everything. To every age its art, to art its freedom. The building itself caused immediate controversy. A low, clean-lined white cube topped with a dome of gilded laurel leaves that the Viennese instantly nicknamed the Golden Cabbage. Inside, with Klimt's reputation rising, the group held exhibitions that drew largely on the Art Nouveau aesthetic mode of clean lines and stylized geometry. In the midst of these developments, the Austrian Ministry of Education commissioned Klimt to paint ceiling panels for the Great Hall of the University of Vienna. It was a distinguished project. The subjects were to be allegories of academic learning, philosophy, medicine, and jurisprudence. But what Klimt delivered bore no resemblance to what had been expected. All three were later destroyed by fire in the Second World War, and we know them only from black and white photographs and, more recently, AI colour reconstructions. Philosophy, first exhibited at the Secession in 1900, showed not the calm figure of reason enthroned, but a churning column of naked human bodies adrift in a dark cosmos, intertwined like ghosts. A petition signed by 87 university professors demanded that the painting not be installed. Medicine, completed the following year, depicted a river of nude figures, old and young, male and female, flowing towards death. In the foreground, the figure of Hygeia, goddess of health, holding a snake, rendered with a frank sensuality that made the allegory feel almost beside the point. Jurisprudence completed the sequence. 3 naked women, sinuous and coiling, surround a condemned man in the grip of an octopus's tentacles. Justice, law, and truth float in the upper margin, remote and indifferent. As a vision of the relationship between institutional power and the human body, it was among the most confrontational images Klimt ever made. For Klimt, these works were a tremendous achievement, but the outcry was profoundly negative, with the word pornographic used to describe the contents of the works. Klimt returned the commission fees and refused to relinquish the paintings. "Enough of this," he said in a public statement. "I want to get free." He never accepted a state commission again. The 3 paintings passed into private hands. Then, in 1945, retreating SS forces set fire to the Immendorf castle in Lower Austria, where they had been stored for safekeeping, and the paintings were lost forever. Despite the controversy, or perhaps because of it, wealthy families still clamoured to hire Klimt to paint their portraits. Meanwhile, he continued to paint smaller, though no less radical works with an allegorical flavour. One of the most important of this era was Judith I, a key moment in his so-called golden phase. In the Old Testament tale, Judith was a widow from the Jewish city of Bethulia. Desperately under siege from the Assyrian army, she devised a scheme to cross over into enemy territory and kill the Assyrian general Holofernes. She pretended to seduce him, then seized his sword, and with 2 swift blows cut off his head. It was a theme that had occupied Western painters for centuries, from Botticelli to Artemisia Gentileschi, and generally treated as a drama of courage and violence. Klimt chose a different approach. What he painted was a figure of erotic power. Her eyes are half closed, her lips are gently parting, her face is captured in a moment of rapture. In her hands she holds the severed head of her enemy and appears almost to flinch at the satisfaction of her victory, with her right eye teetering on the edge of sensual excess. In this age of Sigmund Freud, artists became deeply interested in the possibility of hidden forces moving within the minds of individuals. Across Europe, the period yielded an immense array of artworks by the likes of Edvard Munch and Alfred Kubin, who expressed their own personal anxieties about women by presenting them as purveyors of dark and unpredictable powers. Such femme fatale depictions gained popularity in the late 19th century and perhaps suggest a degree of fear over the increasing autonomy of women in society. Klimt's Judith fits firmly into the trend. Then, in 1903, Klimt travelled to Ravenna in northern Italy, where he stood before the 6th century Byzantine mosaics of the Basilica of San Vitale. Figures flattened, frontal, encrusted with gold, gazing out from the walls with the same directness he had been pursuing in his own work for years. He wrote about the experience with evident excitement. The mosaics are of incredible splendour, he noted in a postcard home. The effect on his painting was defining, and it cemented the arrival of his golden phase. One great work of this phase was his portrait of Adela Bloch-Bauer, a work that had occupied him for 3 years, through more than 100 preparatory drawings. She was the wife of Ferdinand Bloch-Bauer, a wealthy Viennese sugar magnate and one of Klimt's most important patrons. The painting is nearly 5 feet square. Adela Bloch-Bauer sits in the centre of a swirling field of gold and silver and bronze, encrusted with geometric ornament, spirals and eyes and rectangles drawn from Egyptian, Byzantine and Mycenaean sources. Her dress and the background are almost indistinguishable from one another. The boundary between the figure and the decorative field is deliberately dissolved. Only her face and her hands are painted with the kind of careful naturalism you might expect from a conventional portrait. When it was shown in public at the 1907 Mannheim International Art Show, alongside his equally daring portrait of Fritz Riedler, critics called the 2 paintings vulgarities and absurdities. In 1907 into 1908, Klimt painted The Kiss, a high point of his career and one of the most celebrated artworks ever made. It shows a pair of lovers kneeling in a grassy abundance of wildflowers, their forms merged together, contained inside a kind of golden bubble. Everything about their body language suggests a consensual union. Their feet rest as if at the very edge of a cliff. The man bends to kiss the woman's cheek. She tilts her head, eyes closed. The robe that wraps around them is, on closer inspection, 2 garments. The man's covered in rectangular blocks of black and white and gold, the woman's in soft floral roundels. Klimt was searching for a visual language that captured something fundamental and primitive about 2 individuals in a passionate embrace. What the painting means is harder to settle. Klimt's work from this period constantly holds desire and death in the same frame. Whether The Kiss is a painting about love, or about the obliteration of selfhood that love involves, or about something more final still, is a question that the image, with great deliberateness, refuses to resolve. Whilst Klimt never married and had numerous lovers, he did have a constant companion, Emilie Flöge. She was the younger sister of Ernst Klimt's widow, and Klimt had known her since she was a teenager. She became a successful fashion designer who co-founded and ran one of Vienna's most celebrated dressmaking salons. Since Klimt made portraits of many women from the upper echelons of Viennese society, he was able to introduce her to a prosperous client base. She travelled widely, took photographs, and held her own with complete authority in the company she kept. Klimt painted her portrait in 1902, a tall, vertical canvas in which she stands in a shimmering blue-green dress that dissolves into pure pattern, her face painted with the same careful attention he gave to his most important portraits. He wrote to her constantly when they were apart, thousands of letters and postcards, the record of a correspondence sustained over more than 2 decades. Whilst the precise nature of their relationship was never made public, some believe Klimt painted himself and Emilie as lovers in the kiss. Every summer since the 1890s, Klimt had travelled with Emilie and her family to the Salzkammergut, the Lake District of Upper Austria, a region of extraordinary stillness and beauty. He left Vienna's social world entirely behind. He rode on the lakes in the mornings, he walked, and he painted. This brings us to another body of Klimt's work that tends to receive less attention than the portraits and the allegorical paintings, but which many who know his work best regard as among his finest achievements, the landscapes. Klimt almost always used a square canvas for a landscape, a format that resists the conventional horizontal sweep and concentrates attention differently. They show gardens, lake shores, orchards, birch forests, the facades of houses glimpsed through foliage, water reflecting the sky. They are built up in dense, mosaic-like patches of colour, the influence of Ravenna and pointillism working simultaneously on a surface of extraordinary richness. These paintings leave little room for sky or empty space. The canvas is filled, almost compulsively, with pattern and texture, an approach shaped by the influence of Japanese woodblock prints, alongside East Asian and Byzantine art. His landscape works gave him the freedom to explore bold cropping, using it to emphasize the rhythm and structure he found in nature. His later landscapes evolved into robust and celebratory affirmations of life, capturing nature in full bloom. These are paintings that ring out with abundance and fertility, and they are among the least anxious things Klimt ever made. In 1915, Klimt completed his monumental Life and Death, one of his last great allegorical works. On the right are shown a group of sleeping figures intertwined with one another, cocooned in a colourful mosaic of flowers and symbols, representing the universal desire for rest and peace. Yet death lurks nearby, depicted as a grinning skeleton holding a club ready to strike down any one of the sleeping figures. Death's dark cloak is adorned with cemetery crosses. The painting employs one of Klimt's signature approaches to composition, using a 2-dimensional background to create an immaterial setting that pushes the figures to the foreground and helps to universalize the allegory. By 1917, Klimt was at the height of his powers and continued to paint portraits of Viennese high society despite the war and its effect on Austria's economy and society. He had plans for new work. He had been made an honorary member of the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts after receiving the same honour from the Munich Academy a decade or so earlier. The institutions that had once sought to discipline him were now trying to claim him. Then, on the morning of January 11th, 1918, he suffered a severe stroke in his Vienna apartment. It left the right side of his body paralysed, and he was unable to paint. He was moved to hospital, where he contracted pneumonia, linked to the Spanish flu epidemic, then sweeping through a Europe exhausted by war. Klimt died on February the 6th, 1918, at the age of 55, his last words reportedly being, "Emilie must come." The Vienna that Klimt had helped to define did not survive the First World War intact. The Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed in November 1918, and the map of Europe changed irrevocably. The wealthy cosmopolitan and high society elite that had funded Klimt, commissioned his portraits, and bought avant-garde art vanished or lost their fortunes. The grand world of the Ringstrasse was suddenly replaced by economic hyperinflation and political instability. The city's art scene also suffered devastating blows with the loss of 4 monumental figures. Along with Klimt, 1918 saw the deaths of Egon Schiele, Koloman Moser, and Otto Wagner. But the artwork remained. Klimt had demonstrated that decoration and seriousness could operate in unison, and that the most rigorous thinking about human experience could find expression in gold and ornament, in surfaces of almost jeweled intensity. His influence ran forward into Art Deco, into graphic design, into fashion and architecture, and the broader visual culture of the 20th century. His re-evaluation of the traditional themes of portraiture, allegory and landscape resulted in some of the most captivating artworks of the 20th century. In Klimt's hands, beauty became a way of confronting desire, mortality, and the contradictions of modern life itself.